Okay, so mods are going to be released pretty soon. I'm going to have a bit of an overview, so a little bit of testing, and then some gameplay at the end of the video. I do want to quickly go over all of the current mods and what they do. Starting off in the slot A options, there is Blockade and Perimeter. So Blockade is kind of like a sentinel shield, where it's in the front. It's pretty small, but it's only covers the front. It's fairly tall, but it doesn't cover like the side or the back. And then Perimeter is basically like a bastion shield, where it covers all around you, but it doesn't have as much HP as the Blockade. Now, both of these also have ML variants, which stands for multi-layered. So these multi-layered shields, essentially, what multiple layers does is each layer absorbs a full shot, regardless of how strong it is. So even though a regular Blockade could only take one railgun shot before it goes down, a multi-layered Blockade that has like 3 layers, let's say, it'll take 3 shots, 1 for each of the layers, right? And so that's how that works. So one's really good against snipers, but pretty bad against everything else. The other is really good against everything else, but pretty bad against snipers. So it's a very interesting pro-con situation. Again, the difference between the Blockade and the Perimeter is that one of them just has more HP, and the other one just generally has more protection all around. So depending on the kind of build that you're going for would sort of determine which one you go for. I think it's a pretty nicely balanced situation. The only thing that I don't like about it is that the difference between the legendary and the epic is absolutely massive. I have no concept of what the cost difference between these two are going to be. I have no idea. But yeah, it is worth mentioning. The stats on the epic ones are pretty bad, and I would probably just completely ignore them, to be honest. In slot B, we have the Canopy, which is basically just an overhead shield. It's sort of like an Aegis Dome, but it doesn't cover anything except the very top. So that'll help a lot against like mortars, javelins, stuff like that. Or even just if you happen to be on the low ground and someone's above you. In the C slot, we have Hardened Hull, which is literally just an HP boost. Very straightforward. And then in the D slot, we have Galvanic Hull, which is rather complicated. The best way I can describe it, it prevents additional damage. So, like, let's say someone's shooting you from the back, as opposed to taking double the damage that, they're shooting at you with, like, 1,000 damage. You should be taking 2,000 damage. What the Galvanic Hull does is the Galvanic Hull absorbs 1,000 of that, and the other 1,000 goes into your mech. So you still take the regular damage as if they were hitting you from the front, but you don't take the double damage. And this is the same with like status effects. It'll absorb implosion, it'll absorb overheat, the additional damage from mechs like Stalker. We'll get into those tests a little bit later, but basically all of the different ways that you can apply additional damage to someone, the Galvanic Hull absorbs most of that. Now, the Galvanic Hull is technically a shield in that it has an HP bar, which means that once it's gone, it won't protect you anymore, and you'll just, you'll take a lot of damage, like you normally would. So it is not, it's not full immunity to any of those things, but it does protect you from a bit of it. Okay, so for each of the 5 modules that we have, the Canopy and Galvanic Hull are the ones that remain constant. The other 3 are actually different between different mechs. They are divided into 3 groups. I'll get into that in a second. Canopy, the legendary is 50%, epic is 15%, which is pretty sad, to be honest. Galvanic Hull is 80% for legendary and 24% for epic. And this is the same across, every mech. They all share those stats. Now, when I say the same for every mech, this might raise some questions. You'd be like, okay, well, how does that make sense? How come the same module is doing different percentages on different mechs. Well, the reason is because they're individual to mechs. So like, I upgraded a blockade module for my Stalker, and then I took it off my Stalker. I was like, I don't want this on there anymore. I cannot use that module on any other mech. Every single mech has its own module inventory, which is stupid as hell. I absolutely hate. Biggest complaint that I have with this entire thing. I think it's completely unnecessary. I'm just going to get that out of the way. So that is the biggest thing to watch out for, is don't buy or upgrade modules for something that you're not going to use a lot, because you cannot use it for other things. But yeah, with that said, there are 3 groups of mechs for different module stats. We'll call them like high, medium, and low. These are all of the different stats for the high group. And just looking strictly at the hardened hull, the legendary maxes out at 57% additional HP. The medium group hardened hull HP is 49%. And then the low tier group is 43%. Now, I assume that all of these modules cost the same to buy and upgrade. I have no idea, but I would assume that. All of these other stats that are shown are different between the varying groups, but starting off with the high group once again, just to go through the mechs that are in this group. This is some of the weaker mechs in terms of HP, so like Paragon, Puma, Panther, Scorpius, Redox, Lancer, Slingshot, Shadow, Killshot, Surge, which is, I don't agree with that one, Eclipse, Zephyr, and Solus. So those are the ones that get the highest amount of shield and HP bonuses. The ones that are kind of in the middle, the exact stats are shown up on screen. In this group is Stalker, Guardian, Seeker, Gatecrasher, Onyx, Tengu, Lacewing, Nomad, MD, Arachnos, Cheetah, and Hemlock. Now, putting MD and Arachnos in medium as opposed to the high group, I'm not really sure why they did that. I feel like they kind of deserved more. Cheetah as well, to be honest. But hey, I mean, at least they're not in the low group. What is in the low group is Redeemer, Orion, Brickhouse, and literally every single one of the tanks. And of course, the stats for the low group are on the screen. The high group has about 20% more HP and shield than the low group does. Now, of course, these percentages that are shown up on screen, these are augments on the base HP of the mech, right? So it may seem weird to do it all, to have all the tanks in the low group, but because they're all tanks, they're already getting the most out of the buff because they have the most HP already. But even still, I think it's kind of weird to put all of the tanks in the lowest group and then some of the stronger scouts in the high group. Alright, so a few tests that I made. Guardian cannot system crash mods off. MD can heal the additional HP from Hardened Hull, as can Stalker. The Disruptor Shield Pierce does go through the shield mods, the perimeter or blockade. And the path damage does not count towards Galvanic Hull, which makes Disruptor actually a very good weapon to use. If you fire at an enemy's back, then half of the damage will go into the Galvanic Hull, half of the damage will go into the mech itself. The additional damage from Overheat is for Thermal Lance, Quantum Gun, even Ember Gun. The base damage goes into the mech, but the additional Overheat damage, the extra 50%, goes into the Galvanic Hull. This was a test to see if there was a shield deactivation time for multi-layered shields. So I had the highest RPM weapon that I could find, which is a minigun, 10 shots per second. I shot exactly 6 shots at a multi-layer shield with 6 layers, and nope, it just shredded all 6 layers with 6 shots. So testing some abilities. Tengu, the ability damage does not go into Galvanic Hull, goes straight to the mech. Redox, the ability damage does not go into Galvanical, goes straight to the mech. The same goes for Gatecrasher, as well as Onyx. Stalker's damage boost ability, the boosted damage goes into the Galvanic Hull, but you still do the base damage to the regular mech. And this goes for other damage boosting abilities like Brickhouse, Seeker, and Blockhorn. Orion, the additional damage from Hunter's Mark goes into Galvanic Hull as well. So even though this does reduce a lot of Orion's viability, I think it will make it really good just for the shield pierce, because everything's going to have shields. Arachnos, Sentry Turret goes straight to the mech, does not get reduced by the Galvanic Hull. Vortex Field damages the mech, it is not reduced by Galvanic Hull. It's also high enough to deplete overhead shields, the Canopy. Nomad, Dash deals damage to the enemy itself, not reduced by Galvanic. Bastion's EMP Shield, also not reduced by Galvanic. Scorpion's Javelin Array, also not reduced by Galvanic. Moving on to weapons, Graviton Beam is reduced by Galvanic. The Implosion is a status effect based damage, meaning that Implosion goes straight to Galvanic, and the only damage that you're actually dealing to the mech itself is the physical beam damage, which is really, really sad. Stormrack, the shield damage, I believe, does translate into the Galvanic Hull. If you look at the numbers, then the back hit is doing 2.5 times as much as the front hit, which, like, those numbers wouldn't appear unless it was doing the extra 50% from the shield bonus damage. Here I was doing a little bit of testing with just like the height of some of the shields. Now the barricade goes pretty far up. It, you know, that and the canopy like tighten together. But then when you're using perimeter as opposed to barricade, perimeter is the one that goes all the way around. There is a gap between the perimeter shield and the canopy that you can hit. So theoretically, if you were like super careful, you could like snipe an enemy through that gap. And the gap is not like particularly tiny either. It is pretty small, but it's not that small. It's very interesting. But yeah, that's it's gonna be it for me in terms of like testing and stuff. I'm gonna leave you all with a couple matches of gameplay. I'm not gonna have any voiceover during it because I don't really know what to say. But like, yeah, do with it as you will. But that is going to be it for me. Appreciate y'all. Take care.